Hello, my name is Seth. In my previous video, analyzing Castlevania and why it's so difficult, I missed something. Something that I wouldn't realize until after I'd also played Super Castlevania 4. When comparing data gathered from my first playthrough of both games, the data for Castlevania on the NES was recontextualized to the point where I almost took down my previous video on Castlevania because of this new perspective. It all started when I was comparing the difficulty of Castlevania and Super Castlevania 4. Super Castlevania 4 is clearly easier than Castlevania, but I wanted to know why. My search started by checking to see if the pain points of Castlevania could be found in Super Castlevania 4, but they were all addressed. Simon's controls are better. The player now has mid-air control when jumping. Enemies don't swarm or dogpile Simon anymore, and Simon is now a whip master, making previous enemy patterns that were impossible with the whip an absolute pushover when confronted with Simon's advanced whip techniques. So if the pain points from the first game have all been addressed, then were there any new pain points in Super Castlevania 4? I consulted the data and found a pattern. In level 3, I had trouble with the first ascending section of the game. Enemies would attack from above, so I had to learn to whip upward to advance. Level 4 tested me on the jumping mechanics. I needed to learn that Simon could jump again immediately after he landed to progress. Level 6 was all about the advanced whip mechanics. The enemies fly all around Simon, so I needed to practice whipping in all directions and whipping quickly in this stage to advance. The name of the game in Stage 8 was Avoid the Spikes, but the solution was a fair bit of practice. After Stage 8, the pattern was the same. The game would include some tricky obstacle, but after a bit of practice, I would move on to the next level. Now, if we return to the chart for NES Castlevania, we are again met with these very large difficulty spikes. This is how I explained them in my last video. The difficulty spikes that I noticed from my playthrough come from Simon getting dogpiled or ambushed. This is true. I was getting dogpiled or swarmed in the level 5 hallway and ambushed by Dracula in level 6. But if we re-examine level 5 with this new pattern, we find the source of my folly. The obstacle in the hallway is the Axe Knights and the Medusa heads. My solution was using the Holy Water to disable the Axe Knight, allowing me to get through with enough health to take on the boss. But in between encountering the obstacle and overcoming it, I have this large block of deaths where I thought that I just needed more practice with the whip. My error in the last video was focusing on this large block of deaths instead of the solution to the problem, leading me to this conclusion in my previous video. In my first playthrough, I lamented how Simon controlled. But this was the line right before I said that. But everything that the player requires is provided. I say this because I was able to figure out how to overcome all of the obstacles with the tools the game provided. I even brought this up in another Castlevania video that I published on my live channel. The best weapon against the Axe Knights is the Holy Water, but that is only available at the very start of the level. You can tell that the game wants the player to get to the end with the Holy Water. This is the only stage with no pits, and every enemy in this level is easier to take out with the Holy Water. It was right there! The game was trying to teach me how to beat the hallway, but I kept trying to use the whip. If I re-examined the large block of deaths in level 6, it was me using the whip against Dracula when the game provides a better weapon for the battle in the form of the cross. I even say this in my recap video on my first playthrough. I rightfully thought that the cross was the best for the count, and I kept playing with the cross until I beat the count. But then when I encountered the monster, I found that I needed the Holy Water. So I changed up my strategy to collect the Holy Water at the start of the fight, and I came up with a new strategy to defeat the count using the whip. Now this time I made it work with the whip, but this huge block of deaths came from me using the whip when the game provided a better option in the form of the cross sub-weapon. Then it hit me! Castlevania for the NES is built around the sub-weapons. The reason that Super Castlevania 4 is so much easier is because it's built around the whip. Castlevania for the NES is like Mega Man. It gives the player many different tools and then has the player figure out which one is best to use and where. In Mega Man 2, when the player reaches this disappearing block section, Mega Man can technically get through it, but it's going to result in a large block of deaths. Instead, this game is nudging the player to use Item 2, especially on their first playthrough. In level 5 of Castlevania, the player is provided with the Holy Water, the Axe, and the Cross. The player needs to figure out which item is best to use to beat the level. When they do that, then the large block of deaths end and progress resumes. Super Castlevania 4 is like Super Mario Bros. The entire game is designed around the default form of Mario. Every stage can be beaten as Small Mario. At no point is Super Mario or Fire Mario required to progress through the game. Super Castlevania 4 is built around Simon and his whip. The sub-weapons are still provided to the player, but at no point will the player's progress be halted, like this, because they are trying to play a section of the game with the whip only. Super Castlevania 4 does its part to reinforce the whip mechanics over the sub-weapons by how the enemies are introduced to the player. I discussed the design of Super Castlevania 4 in this video on my live channel, and how Super Castlevania 4 slowly teaches the player how to use all of the whip mechanics before removing access to the sub-weapons from the player at the end of the game. Check out that video here, and thank you for watching.